I'm Cindi McGee. Today in the Makin's Clay Design Studio, I'm showing you how to liquefy Makin's Clay to create a great texture paint. Liquefied Makin's Clay can be used as a texture paint, as a watercolor wash. It can also be used to dip fabric to create beautiful sculptures and dressings for sculptures, like these pieces by Lex Sorrentino. The first step in our liquefaction process is to prepare our clay. Today I'm going to be using blue, Concord blue, and green, and I'll show you how we're going to do it starting with our blue clay. I've removed it from the packaging, and inside it is double wrapped. We would cut off the first wrapper. And now at this point, if we were only using a small amount, we could simply cut off what we want and put the rest into a Ziploc bag with either a damp paper towel or a moist towelette, and then it would be ready for use for quite some time to come. It'll stay good and fresh. We're actually going to use all of our clay for this process though. I'm removing this wrapper. Now if you have clay that stays on it, you can either scrape it off or just use the clay that you have in your hand and it will lift it, so there's very little waste with Makin's Clay. It's soft and ready to use right out of the package. It's very pliable and there is no conditioning needed, making it perfect for all age groups. It's also non-toxic, hyperallergenic, and environmentally safe. So to begin the liquefaction process, we're first going to roll our clay to a thin layer. And to do that, we're using the Ultimate Clay Machine. The Ultimate Clay Machine has 9 thickness settings and non-stick Teflon rollers, making it ideal for use with all types of polymer clay. You would always start with the first setting, which is the widest, which is a setting number 1. Just flatten your clay slightly. And roll it through the machine. Now we're going to go to a setting number 2 for this process. So I just turn my handle and we're just that much thinner. Now you could hand roll it. If you're hand rolling, you want it to be, it's about 1/8 of an inch or so. There's really no definite measurement for this though. And the next step is to put your rolled clay, we've done this with our blue, our Concord blue, and our green now. You're going to put it in a Ziploc bag. And then you're going to put a paper towel on top of your clay. Now, if you're doing larger sheets of clay, you certainly can use a larger bag, and your variation on the amount of water will differ depending. It is important that you use bottled water when liquefying Makin's Clay. Now, it's about 2 to 3 tablespoons. You want to wet your paper towel. I'm very technical. I just kind of pour in a bit, but you can measure it. You want to thoroughly saturate that paper towel. And you'll be able to see if it's absorbing in, and if you need a little bit more water, you can add a little bit more. And then you would seal your bag. And you're going to set it aside and wait. The process will begin at about 30 minutes, but you're going to want to continue to check it until it is the consistency that's ready to use. And I'll show you what it looks like then next. So once the liquefaction process is complete, you basically have almost 2 products. You have like a watercolor wash, which is very sheer, or you have this great texture paint. And what I did for this project was I just blended my 3 shades together. I wanted it to look like Under the Sea. You can see how I can get layers of texture and it gets thicker. I can pile it if I want it higher, or I can make it smooth. I did the edges and I did all the way down to the base of my canvas. It's thick. It sort of reminds me of a pudding consistency, but I love the layer and the texture that you can get with it. Now, it is a little lighter at this point. Once it's dry, I'm going to bring in this one that I've already allowed to dry. It does darken. Now, this one has a little more of the blues, you can see, but you can see I did the tops and the sides. I left this open because we're going to add some sand down there. But that is how simple it is to liquefy Makin's clay for a totally unique application. To make our sand, I'm using this light adobe clay from the Earth Tones collection, and I'm applying it directly to the canvas. It will stick to this canvas without any additional adhesive. And I'm going to drag it and cover the bottom. And around to the sides. And again, I don't want it to be perfectly straight because it's supposed to just look like sand on the bottom of our ocean. To create that sand texture, I'm using our sand texture sheet. And I'm just going to place that on top. These can be used on either side. They work equally well, but I'm raising my image for this one. So I'm just applying that directly to that clay. So there we have our sand. Now we need to make our seashells, and to do that for some of them I just used the natural clay from the Vineyard Tones collection, and for others I blended a little bit of it with some brown from the Earth Tones till it was just marbled a bit. This is a technique I like to do for making seashells. It makes them look more realistic to me. And I'm using the seashell push mold. Our push molds are great in that they're clear and flexible, so you can see exactly where you're placing your clay. Now you could just push it in and remove it and trim it, but because they're clear, I can tell that I'm keeping my clay exactly in the margins of that shape that I want, and I can just pop it out, and then I can continue making my shells. I don't have to wait for one to dry. These also work great with resins and fondant. So I made an assortment of shells, and again, I mounted them right to my canvas. While the clay is still fresh clay will stick to fresh clay without any additional adhesive. If adhesive is needed, we use something like a Beacon tacky glue or something similar like that. You just do not want to use hot glue because it will not hold over time. Next, I'm going to show you how I created the seaweed for our piece. To make our seaweed for our mixed meteor canvas, I'm using the Makin's Professional Ultimate Clay Extruder. First, I'm starting with grape leaf green clay from the Vineyard Tones, and I'm using our number 8 disc, which is a multi-hole. And I'm just going to extrude kind of some long, crazy strands and pinch it off. And because I'm applying this while my sand is still fresh, again, I don't need really any additional adhesive. I'm just wrapping it around to the base of my canvas and pressing it into that sand clay. Now, if you wanted to, if you press lightly, it will adhere to that background. But you could go in and add a touch of tacky glue here and there if you wanted to. And I just tore off because I wanted it random to kind of have that wavy seaweed effect. I repeated the same procedure using olive clay and this slotted disc to make these wider strands of seaweed, which I again mounted to the base, and then I kind of twined them through my stringy seaweed. And our last step is our fish. The Makin's brand Seashells push mold also has this adorable little fish, and I used some natural clay to mold my fish. And I wanted to give him some fun color and make him look like a clownfish. For that, I'm just using some acrylic paint. Makin's clay takes paints beautifully when it's fresh or when it's dry. I simply painted on my stripes, and then I wanted to add some detail. And to do that, I'm just using a permanent marker, which is another great way to color Makin's clay. I just added my details around my stripes. And I added some accent to his eye, and I also colored his fins a bit to give him a bit more contrast. Now, if he was still fresh, he could be, again, mounted to the background, and he probably would stick very well, but I did use just a touch of Beacon Tacky Glue, again, to mount my fish, because when I painted mine, they were actually dry. So I added some tacky glue, and I mounted him to my canvas. And there you have your finished under the sea canvas using a number of different techniques, including liquefaction of Makin's clay. I hope you enjoyed learning how easy it is to liquefy Makin's clay to make a great texture paint. And we invite you to explore the possibilities of using Makin's clay in your creative projects.